Hi and welcome to my presentation of the didactical lesson design. I decided to focus on the book. It's Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. And I don't unfortunately teach at the moment any English classes, but my lesson will be for the imaginary 10th graders. The overall topic as a background for reading this book could be English as a global language and historical perspectives on how English became a global language. And South Africa is definitely a country that is supposed to be mentioned when we speak about this topic and colonization. So, this book, Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. I decided to focus on three of these competence aims. They include the essence of being able to read a longer authentical text in English, understand, interpret, and pupils are supposed to make their own thoughts about the plot, characters, etc., and maybe connect what they read to other historical events, to other people and ideas. In the new curriculum, English literature is strongly connected to the language development. That's why I focus also on the fluency and varied vocabulary in the idiomatic expressions that my pupils are supposed to use. And as a background, I mention the aim that is focusing on exploring and describing ways of living, ways of thinking, communication patterns, and diversity in the English speaking world. And I break these competence aims into learning objectives when I ask my students to explain what apartheid was, to name three laws or rules that were applied on Black people in South Africa during the apartheid time, and explain why Trevor Noah was born a crime. Why? Why do we want our pupils to read? Well-known social critic Nussbaum claims that reading literature plays an important role in developing of a sympathetic imagination. So, fictional texts, they challenge readers to explore different identities and perspectives of life. And that means that we develop our capacity to understand people around us and the society around us. That is a good reason for reading. And developing language skills and intellectual awareness has always been a part of the English subject. So, um, the book that we chose is telling us about the history, society, and culture through one person's life, or maybe his family life. This book is autobiographic and written by Trevor Noah, that is a well-known person. He's a stand-up comedian, a TV host, and who is also using his voice on social media platforms. I'm not sure if my pupils, imaginary pupils, know who he is, but he will be definitely introduced as a author of the book and as a well-known person, a star. I would focus in this lesson, I would focus on reading as a process. I would like to give my pupils different strategies of reading where we combine extensive reading and intensive reading throughout the book. And this lesson plan is focused on reading chapter 2, that is also called Born a Crime. This chapter is sort of a beginning, a start for Trevor's birth, and it is also connected to the main title of the whole book. I connect my lesson plan to core elements that are working with text in English, where my pupils will meet a longer authentical text that has a name to be part of the experience of being able to read and focus on the longer text, and also to understand and be able to discuss, interpret the main ideas and topics of the book, and express their own feelings and thoughts related to the topic. I will also focus on also connecting my lesson plan to language learning core element, basically on learning vocabulary and word structure in this case, in this lesson. Democracy and citizenship would definitely be a very important interdisciplinary topic that I can connect to my lesson, because this story is about a man or a child growing up in South Africa as a mixed race, and he tells us about his childhood and his life later in South Africa. So this might be a part of the motivation that my pupils would actually read and finish the book, and this will help them to develop their understanding of different societies and cultures and learn about important periods in the history of South Africa. So, how I would do my lesson. So, the pre-reading activity of the lesson would be a quick review what we read in chapter 1. And I would start the lesson with reading chapter 2 aloud for the whole class. It's a very uniting procedure when we all start reading. I'm reading aloud, they will follow in their books. And all chapters in the book start with short historical information about South Africa or apartheid regime or some important events. And so it does in chapter 2. After that, I would divide my class into the groups with like 4 or 5 pupils in each group and hand out 4 or 5 excerpts as a copy from the book to each pupil in the group. So each group will have the same excerpt to work with. And they are supposed to answer the questions provided by me while reading the text. And I will also ask them to search for information, noticing keywords and phrases that I provide for them with the text. And these I would call for intensive reading on some excerpts to teach pupil reading strategies and to pay attention to certain information in the text. So here is one of the examples of the excerpts that I would suggest for reading in one of the groups. And here are suggestions for the questions. What was a mixed family, for example, who were called colored people? What kind of laws do you learn from these excerpts? And then we speak about the laws that were applied on Black people, or maybe just in general what they find in this chapter. And I suggest keywords that might help them to express themselves and answer the questions later when we are going to when we're going to summarize at the end of the lesson. As a next work, as a task 2, I would suggest using cards with different reading roles. These are cards that you can find at Skrivesenteret. I have a very good experience using them in foreign language classes. As an example, I would maybe show you the word artist, ordkunstner, where one of the pupils would get a role as a word artist, and that means that he or she will have to find words that he or she finds interesting, new, difficult, strange, funny, or important. And she will have, or he or she would have to argue for why he or she thinks that they are funny, interesting, important, and so on. And I think that working with these roles or these cards that gives them the role is that every person, every pupil having a role will become sort of an expert in his field of working with this text. And I think this is a very good way to adapt the level for each pupil, especially if you have different levels of the knowledge or language levels in the same group. And at the same time, while students, your pupils working with this task, it gives you as a teacher a very nice opportunity to give them feedback or notice for yourself how they work, and maybe have a conversation later. And that I would suggest to be part of the formative assessment. And to follow up the reading part, I would go for deep learning that takes a really big part in the new curriculum. And I would suggest for going further for apartheid system in South Africa, or topic as a discrimination, segregation in the United States of America, or indigenous people of Australia. Because deep learning is said to consist of citizenship, collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, and building character. And in the 10th grade, our pupils can work further on their preparation on one of the topics that is also part of a bigger topic of the English-speaking world and colonization. So I think this is a nice way to continue the work with this topic. Thank you for your attention.